The new year has brought new hurdles for Huawei, with a second employee's arrest, this time in Europe. What's the case this time, and what does this news mean for Huawei's European business? And the U.S. government has broken its record for the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Who's the most hurt, and why are the two sides so deeply locked in conflict? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. Another year, another drama. Just 1 month after Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou was detained in Canada at the request of the U.S., a second Huawei employee was arrested, this time in Poland. Wang Weijing, who was a sales director of the company, was sacked following his arrest, along with a former Polish security official last Friday. Both are charged with conducting espionage on behalf of China. Huawei on Saturday announced the decision and said the employees' actions have no relation to the company and stressed that it complies with the law in all countries. Poland's Internal Affairs Minister, however, called for the European Union and NATO to work on a joint position over whether to exclude Huawei from their markets. So what really happened? Why did the Polish government make such a fuss about the case? Fear-mongering is cheap, but is it wise? It's convenient for one country to be a hired gun of another in exchange for interests and protection, but at what price? Joining me in the Beijing studio is Professor Cui Hongjian, Director of the European Department at the China Institute of International Studies, and from Southampton, UK, Mike Bastin, Senior Lecturer at the University of Southampton. Before we start the discussion, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs had this to say on Monday when answering a question related to reports that the Polish government and officials are investigating the risks posed by Huawei. Let's listen in.
Some people are now seeking to use groundless accusations about so-called possible security threats to suppress and restrict Chinese high-technology companies' development abroad. I think all parties are very clear about their true intentions. Everyone agrees with the view that security issues must be told by facts, and there must be solid evidence to determine which actions, who, or which companies are truly security threats.
A very good question, and let's start the discussion, and warmest welcome to both gentlemen to The Point. Let me go to Professor Cui here in the Beijing studio. As I said, this latest development happened just 1 month after Huawei's CFO Meng Wanzhou was detained in Canada, which was in international spotlight. Is there a coincidence of the timing of the second arrest?
Yes, if it happened, maybe just like a Polish size, just maybe a coincidence with Madam Meng's evidence, but I think it would be an artificial, coincidence, because as we know, now anything related to Huawei will be a very, very hot issue, and also at the same time, as we know, now the United States is trying to ask or require its allies in Europe to do something, to be against the Huawei. So as this time, even as we know now, it looks like this incident in Poland, it looks like a more individual, behavior will not be more relevant with Huawei. But anyway, even the former Huawei employee will be a very, very hot issue, and also it's also a very big case for Polish government to show its loyalty as allies to United States.
And yeah, just as you said, maybe that's exactly the reason why a spokesperson for Poland's secret services chief, Stanislaw Zarin, when he tweeted the arrest in English on Twitter, he also included the links of the Twitter accounts of many others. For instance, the U.S. Department of State, the FBI, the CIA, the U.S. Secretary of State, and NATO press, and so on and so forth, and the U.S. Army, Europe, so on and so forth. Mr. Bastin, could you help us know why would someone do that? What is he trying to do there?
Well, I think there's several reasons. I think certainly saddling up to the Americans is one, and trying to gain favor quite clearly. Also, I think what Huawei is up against is there are two factors here. There's a rise in nationalism, populism across Europe, particularly Eastern Europe. So I think these governments, the Czech government is similar as well, are trying to appeal to their public, their following, and cement their position in power by supposedly taking on a foreign company. But I also think the largest and the single biggest reason is the competitive threat that Huawei now faces. Huawei has been very successful globally, has captured 15% of the smartphone market, ahead of Apple, just behind Samsung. It also has an envious range, a product range of telecommunications networking equipment as well that other competitors don't have. So I think there's competitor envy out there as well.
Yeah, the Trump administration has not been shy about their push against, behind its allies to block Huawei from telecom networks. But I find that kind of difficult to understand. Let me again go to Mr. Bastin. A country, the world's biggest country, after a Chinese company. I mean, that's a little bit over the top for me, Mr. Bastin.
Well, I think it comes down, a lot of it comes down to Trump and Trump's approach here, and the reason why he was elected. He was elected on a platform of sort of euphoria, nationalism, very, very negative attitude. He's going on this shutdown in the American government, going on about the wall. He realizes that does actually appeal to a lot of American voters. So again, as the Poles and the Czech government are trying to do, they're trying to actually appeal to their own public, and they feel that it's going to resonate.
I'm not very sure.
Spectacularly.
Yeah. Mr. Bastin, you say they're trying to appeal to their public. I'm not sure. I mean, do the public have a problem against using a good and cheaper phone? I think the government probably trying to appeal to the United States, and this is one thing. Secondly, U.S. President Donald Trump said last October that he wants the 5G network in the United States to be top. He said it is imperative that America be first in fifth generation wireless technologies, but by shutting out foreign competitors, is the U.S. likely to achieve that goal? Professor Cui.
Yes, as we know that I think it would be one part of the measures by Mr. Trump and the American government. As we know now, I recognize it's a very, very unfair, treatment, especially in trade and investment and technology. As we know, yes, now Huawei takes the leading role in the 5G network. So it gives a very, very, I think, a big problem for Mr. Trump to try to prioritize this American first. So I think yes, to do something, even I think the worst thing now for American administration and Mr. Trump is in the security name and to interfere with these economic and commercial behaviors. So I think it's very, very bad. But now the question is, I think the real question is, now if those countries just follow the logic of Mr. Trump, what will happen is there will be maybe two or three different groups, and on the divided line, not because of the competitiveness in technology, just because of the systems or ideologic everything. So if so, we can even smell the Cold War.
Because these countries are being forced to take sides, right, between the United States and China. And but I think that's also kind of difficult to understand, because on the one hand, Poland's internal affairs minister called for EU and NATO to work on a joint position on whether to exclude Huawei from their markets. On the other hand, he says Poland wants to have good, intensive and attractive relations with China. It's a huge market. It bothers me. You know, this kind of statement, it bothers me. China is good only because it's a huge market. China is not good because it's an equal country which deserves respect and equal treatment like any other country in the world. It's a huge market. Mr. Bastin, what do you think of that?
I think you have a fair point. I think what we also have to understand is that the West, by and large, still don't really, I think, understand China, and they still look at it purely as an economic opportunity. And there's a lot of ignorance out there. So this fear, these security fears, first of all, there's no tangible evidence at all that's emerged. So I think it really is scaremongering. And secondly, if you look at China and China's history and China's position in the world, it's not at all aggressive, expansionist. It's not going to embark on some sort of military campaign. That's just not in its nature, and I think that needs to be stressed, and perhaps the Chinese government needs to stress that more. So it does bother me as well that China really is a force for good, harmony and peace around the world, and not just about an economic opportunity. And it's about time the West, particularly those Eastern European nations, which are slightly weaker and slightly perhaps more beholden to the US, need to take note of. The US are trying to put pressure on the British government, who haven't actually come out with a policy just yet, and I suspect the stronger European nations won't fall behind and fall in line with the US as much as some of the weaker Eastern European nations.
Well, we try a lot to explain ourselves. You know, I think China tries everything possible to explain its policy and to explain its good intention, and nobody wants to believe that, right? It's very difficult to say you're innocent. You say, I'm innocent for decades, I'm innocent, I don't have any ambition, and they say, prove me otherwise. You know, if you, and that's the same dilemma that Huawei is faced here. It's impossible to prove they're innocent when you have no. When people are continuously or repeatedly accuse you of being a suspect of have dirty hands, and you know, bring me the evidence. The West cannot, and yet they say Huawei is, you know, not clean. And then we're not just looking at Poland here. We're also potentially looking at a very mixed picture, mixed messages coming from the Czech government. The president has come out and said that there is no evidence against any accusation against Huawei, and yet the prime minister and the country's security agency chief seems to have positions coming back and forth. Professor Cui, are these two incidents related?
I think so far, if we put those two cases together, we can find that they are different. Indeed, as I know that for the Czech Republic, yes, I think the government got a pressure from Washington to do something with Huawei. As I know that Huawei did a very good job in Czech Republic and also some other Central and Eastern European countries. But of course, at the same time, as we also know that most of the Central and Eastern European countries, they rely a lot, I mean, on the United States in some issue, for security and some other. So yes, the Czech government got some pressure from Washington to look at Prime Minister Babis wanted to do something. But at the same time, as we know, in the last 10 years, China and the Czech Republic, we got a very, very good relations. So now I think it would be a dilemma for Czech Republic.
But the president, I interviewed the president personally myself, and I think he has a very strong and very reasonable position there. So hopefully they'll be able to stand their ground. Finally, in one sentence, Professor Cui, how do you think China can handle this kind of siege against Huawei in Europe and in North America?
Yes, firstly, I think we need to pay more patient for any kind of challenges outside, especially we are waiting for the truth. Now, most of the countries that follow up the American, they just name that a possible security threat. So the question or the answer would be, what's the possibility? So far, I think the Huawei and its technology will not be irreplaceable, especially for most of the European countries. I think finally the market and also the public opinion will make a decisive decision.
Hopefully soon enough. We have to leave it there. Many thanks to my two guests, Cui Hongjian, Director of the European Department of China Institute of International Studies, and from Southampton, UK, Mike Bastin, Senior Lecturer at the University of Southampton.